from High Holidays, because that's really just looming large in the minds of everybody who works at Mishkan, but I'm sure it's very distant from all of your minds. It's far, far away. And you should let it live far, far away. It's better for you that way. But in the meantime, there's actually a lot of things happening in the community that for those of you who do live locally and maybe this is, as we talked about earlier, like something has emerged in the service and you're like, my gosh, maybe it would be, fun to do a little more Jewish in my life here. Just to let you know, we have services we kind of stagger them. Today is Saturday morning, as you know, and we are on next Friday night. We also have a new builder picnic before services next Friday night. And then the following week, we're on for Shabbat morning on the 16th, and then Friday night, and then we're on for Shabbat morning the 30th. And then it's suddenly September, and we're entering into the month of Elul, which is the month before High Holidays, at which point we will tell you, start thinking about the High Holidays. We have a daily morning minyan online. And then a whole bunch of different groups that I'm not going to say the particular times and places they're all meeting, but just to let you know, these are all options for showing up and finding community. There is an online disability and chronic illness support group. There is a fertility journey group. There is a group for people contemplating parenting as single parents. We have a Rosh Chodesh group. Are you leading that still, Abby? Are you leading the Rosh Chodesh group still? No. You passed the baton, which is amazing. So we have a Rosh Chodesh group that's not led by Abby, but led by other people that are great. There's a Jewish movie club where the next movie they're watching is Crossing Delancey. Yeah, so good. Really? Okay. For crafters, there's a crafternoon next Sunday, hanging out in a builder home and doing crafts. There's yoga in the park. These are all led by different people at Mishkan. Next Monday night, I'm going to be in dialogue with a professor from Emory University who wrote a book called Our Palestine Question, about basically the Jewish community's long history with contending with precisely what we are seeing and, struggling with in this moment. But the question of the fact that Arabs and Palestinians have always lived in the land of Israel and Palestine. And so the book is called Our Palestine Question, how Jews have been talking about this and thinking about this for almost 100 years. Super interesting, and it's just won a bunch of Jewish Book Awards for history and just Jewish Book Awards. For any teens that are out there, the Teen High Holiday Design Lab is coming up, and it's so fun, and it's an opportunity to help design the programs that the kids will be doing during High Holidays, and then help create them on the High Holidays themselves. And then, like, in a couple weeks, Matthew is leading an Elul music jam. If the music is moving you and you want to make more of it outside of services and bring a guitar or a trombone or a drum or whatever, that's what Matthew is here to help make happen. And I guess to say, like, if anyone who is out there is considering becoming a builder, joining our community, now is a great time. We're having a new builder orientation next Thursday night online, and which is an opportunity to get to know other new builders in the community, learn about the values of the community, and then we're doing a new builder aliyah coming next Shabbat. So I think that's about all I want to talk about in the front of things coming up. And so now I want to do a little teaching to orient us in where we are right now on the calendar and also in the Torah. So I would just say, like, take a deep breath, settle in. This is a little teaching. All right? Are we okay with that? Yeah, learning a little? All right. So whenever we have new staff that join the Mishkan team, which actually has happened 3 times in the last 2 months, we will I'll sit down with them and I will share with them the story of Mishkan. It's not that long, it's about 14 years, but it's a chance to kind of hand over some of the institutional memory that lives only in my head. And I share with people, kind of where we've been, what we've learned, what's gotten us to this point, what we've done wrong, where we've stumbled, so that the next chapter can be written with more clarity and learning from the mistakes of the past. So Deuteronomy is like Moses's version of that. Right? He is handing over not 14 years, but 41 years of institutional history and memory to the Jewish people. And much of the story, if we've been reading along, we already know because we were reading it in real time, what happened to the people at every point along the way. But Moses knows he's not going into the land of Israel with these people. And this is a new generation. They didn't live these stories, and they weren't around for what happened. And so he wants to make sure they internalize the lessons that he took away from these stories, right? In Hamilton, Lin-Manuel Miranda quoting George Washington saying about his farewell address, right? Like, I want to talk about what I have learned, the hard-won wisdom I have earned. That's what Moses is doing. And so in this week's Parsha, Moses relates a particularly consequential story. This is the story that resulted in the last generation of Israelites not getting to enter the land of Israel. They thought that was where they were going. That was the direction they were walking. And as a result of this story, God said, I don't think so. Not you. It'll be your children. So this was back in the book of Numbers. It was actually the last time we were in this room. 40 years earlier, the Israelites are on the cusp of entering the land of Israel. They send out scouts to go scout the land to bring back a report. And the report that the scouts bring back terrifies the people. You know, they come back with stories of like fortified cities and giant grapes and overwhelming danger. And the people panic and cry and they moan that they wish that they could just die right here, or better yet, send us back to Egypt. And the God, or the character of God, as I like to refer to the character of God in the Torah, is so disappointed that God decrees that this generation will not enter the land, and instead it'll be their children. And so here we are, and it's 40 years later, and Moses is telling these children the story, but he alters it in a few significant ways, which he does like all over the book of Deuteronomy. Even the 10 Commandments aren't exactly the same as they were the first time. So he says to the people, Moses says to the people, you sulked in your tents, and you said, oh, it's because God hates us that God brought us out of Egypt to hand us over to the Amorites and wipe us out. Our kinsmen took the heart out of us, saying, we saw a people there stronger and taller than we, large cities with walls sky high, even Anakites, which is often translated as giants. So Moses is telling the children what their parents said. And so I know I haven't told you much, and I know we didn't do like a close reading of the two stories side by side, but given what I described to you about the first story and this quote from the second story, can you surmise even a little bit of what sounds different and why Moses might have chosen to tell it differently in that way? It's okay if not. I know, it's like this would have been a really good text study. No? Yes, sorry? The tone is different. What do you mean? Yeah, it's definitely, yes, it's told differently and the tone is different than when we saw it back in Numbers. And when we saw it back in Numbers, actually, we get paragraphs of what the spies themselves say. They had these huge grapes, they had these huge people, they had big cities. And in this version, well, you know what? Well, Moses tells the people what the people said, right? Not so much the spies. Let's hold on to that for a second and pivot, and I'll come back to it, to like, pivoting now to where we are on the Jewish calendar. This Parsha always coincides with this time on the Jewish calendar, which is like right before the holiday of Tisha B'Av, which means the 9th of Av. 9th of Av is a day of fasting and mourning where we sit on the floor and read the book of Lamentations and remember the calamities of our history and the pain of the present moment. The holiday is maybe the wrong word for it. It is a day of observing in that way. It is an intense day, and even what I just described, I mean, you could imagine it's also painfully resonant right now. And so when the sun sets, and by the way, that holiday begins tonight. So if you are feeling the urge to sit on the floor and weep and read Lamentations, either because of the pain of history, our shared collective history, or because of the pain of the present moment, and you need a place to cry, I invite you to join us. There's a spot on our floor. Tonight it happens, and then we begin a 25-hour fast, which ends on Sunday night. And when that fast ends, we get up off the floor and begin this kind of methodical, intentional journey for 7 weeks until Rosh Hashanah. And it is a journey from despondency and despair, as sort of embodied by sitting on the floor, to renewal and transformation and hopefulness, as embodied by walking upright and walking into the new year, hearing the sound of the shofar, being awakened. And the essential act that makes that transformation possible is, repeat after me, teshuvah. Teshuvah. Teshuvah means turning or returning. It's often translated as repentance, and it means turning away from old habits and people and systems that may be holding us back, and turning toward new habits and new people or communities or structures or systems that help us become the people we want to be in the world. Rambam, the great medieval philosopher, wrote that this kind of moral and spiritual turning is only complete. You only know if you've really done it if you find yourself back in exactly the same place where you made that wrong choice before, maybe many times before, and you're in that exact same place again, and this time you make a different choice. And then the question, of course, is asked, but what happens if you don't find yourself back in that same place? And he says, don't worry. You will. You will. And so Rabbi Lou writes in this brilliant book that I just have to recommend to all of you. It is the High Holiday Bible. It's called This Is Real, and you are completely unprepared. You will hear me quoting from it for the next 2 months. So what he writes in this book is the unresolved elements of our lives continue to pull us into the same moral and spiritual circumstances until we figure out how to resolve them. They carry us into harm's way until we become aware of them, conscious of them, and begin to change them. And all of us have recurring motives in the dark, unresolved corners of our lives, in the domestic unhappiness we replicate from marriage to marriage, in the problems that seem to follow us from one job to the next, and the mistakes that turn out to be the same mistakes which we make over and over. Right? How many of you have shown up for Rosh Hashanah and thought to yourself about the things that you intended to, heal or make better from last year? And they're exactly the same things. Year after, thank you. I mean, I certainly have. And this is why Moses, in the book of Deuteronomy, in the second telling, tells this different version of the story. So the Israelites are in the precise place that their ancestors were. They are in the same place that they found themselves 40 years before. And this recurring family story has led them to this place. And this time, let's say last time, they acted from this place of groupthink and fear and anxiety that led them into this place of kind of collective panic that they ratcheted up to the extent that they could not act with wisdom, with strategy, with decisiveness, with compassion for themselves, for the group, for the journey. Like all of these things are things you lose when you're acting from a place of abject fear, which they found themselves in. And so they lost their opportunity to enter the promised land. And so Moses sees that this exact same thing could happen again. And so he says, I'm warning you, I'm begging you, don't make the same mistake. You have too much to lose. Make a different choice. Make a different choice. You can do it. And so this holiday, as I said, is always paired with Tisha B'Av. And so the holiday of Tisha B'Av, if we're thinking about the things that have come before, like the calamities that we are honoring or remembering on this day, start a long time ago. So kind of most famously, you have the destruction of the first and second temples in Jerusalem by the Babylonians and the Romans, respectively, in 586 BCE and in 70 CE. And both of these destructions included protracted sieges on the city of Jerusalem that left blood running in the streets, tens of thousands of people killed and starved, and ultimately the burning of the temple and the razing of the city and the diaspora, the exile of the Jews from that land. And all of this is portrayed viscerally while in the Book of Lamentations, which we, as I said, read sitting on the floor tonight and tomorrow. But actually the calamities of Tisha B'Av don't start or end there in history. The Mishnah, really old book of Jewish law, says that the story we just read about the spies and about the punishment, not getting to go into the land, that happened on Tisha B'Av, as it turns out in the Torah. The rabbis are very crafty and good at, kind of making their case. If they're in the absence of information, they're good at making a case. So they say that disappointing, devastating thing happened on Tisha B'Av. But then you fast forward to the First Crusade in 1096, on or around Tisha B'Av, the expulsion of Jews from England and France and Spain in 1290 and 1306 and 1492 all happened on or around Tisha B'Av, as it turns out. The liquidation of the Warsaw Ghetto and the deportation of Jews to Treblinka happened on the 9th of Av in 1942. And even the bombing of the Asociación Mutual Israelita Argentina, otherwise known as the AMIA bombing in Buenos Aires, which a lot of American Jews don't know about, but it was the largest and most deadly terror attack against Jews ever outside of the land of Israel, killing and wounding almost 400 people at a Jewish building, took place on the 10th of Av in 1994. And so when we look at this staggering list, this kind of stacking of traumatic events, you kind of have two options. And one is to say, it's a cursed time. You know, it's a cursed time on the calendar, and the fact is, like, people will always hate us and want to kill us. We're always, you know, we're the eternal victims. That's what you take away from that stack, you know, which, as I was thinking about that as an alternative to, you know, where we'll go in a second, I was thinking about, do you remember that poster or T-shirt, Religions of the World? It used to be in, like, novelty shops and stuff. Okay, nobody knows what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. It was funny. It was religions of the world. And then every single religion was just a line described with its expression of, what's a four-letter word, but let's just say, stuff happens. So Christianity is, you know, Jesus died for your stuff, right? Catholicism was, you know, if stuff happens, you probably deserve it. Buddhism was, this stuff is an illusion. Judaism was, why does this stuff always happen to us? Which, if you're Jewish, like, it's funny, you know, that's kind of this thing, like, well, you know, oh, we're just the eternal victims of history. Well, guess what? Rabbi Alan Lew and I agree that this is not a functional, healthy way to walk through the world. The second way to interpret this kind of stack of calamities is that we have to understand things will keep happening the same way until we change, until we learn the lessons we need to learn from our history. The first approach is easy, right? On some level, it's no fun to be a victim, but you get to be mad at the world and to not change because it's not your fault. The second is hard. The second orientation is hard. And the rabbis who designed our tradition picked the second orientation for us, right? Inviting us as Jews to consider what we might do differently, how we might make tshuva so that we can break out of the cycle of tragedy. That is why the high holiday cycle begins on the floor. And that is why the essential gesture of the high holidays is tshuva. And it begins with Tisha B'Av. The biggest change in Moses' retelling of the spy stories is he shifts the focus. He shifts the focus away from the failure of the leaders. Oh, it's their fault. They led us into, you know, this panic, and shifts it to the people. That tone you were talking about, Sheila. Don't wait for better leaders. Be better people. Do better. You can do better. I know you can, Moses says. And so he invites the people not to fall back on a, you know, sort of assuming the role of victim, but to claim their agency in the story. And I think that is what the rabbis who designed our tradition, who placed the, you know, the calendar of Torah readings, you know, against the particular calendar of the holidays we celebrate, wanted us to notice in the relationship of those two stories and Tisha B'Av today. Because the rabbis ask the question in the Talmud, why was Jerusalem destroyed? They ask the question, and they could have just answered it historically accurately. The army of the Babylonians and Romans was much stronger than we were. They could have left it there. They didn't. What they said was, why was Jerusalem destroyed? Because of sinat chinam, which means gratuitous hatred, or toxic polarization, or dehumanization of other people, turning other people into others that are no longer people, such that you can dismiss them, decide they don't matter, and they cease to be able to be helpful when you need to face a stronger army. They cease to be able to be your allies, friends, colleagues, when you need to actually face a stronger enemy. And the Talmud goes on to describe how the leaders in Jerusalem had fortified themselves into the city, which was under siege, and they had enough grain in the storehouses in the city to last 20 years. They could have waited out the Romans for 20 years. And while that happened, they were planning to negotiate diplomatically, to have leaders talk to leaders, but there was a minority, the Talmud describes, of violent Jewish extremists called Biryonim that wanted to fight. They wanted war, and so they burned the storehouses of grain, forcing the gates to have to open after the people began to starve. And they allowed and watched the people starve, knowing that it would force those gates open. But by the time the gates were forced open to let in food, the Roman army rushed in, and the Jews were too weak and fractured to be able to do anything other than surrender and be pushed into exile. Jerusalem burned, and we mourn that day for the rest of Jewish history. So you have to wonder, why don't the rabbis just blame the Romans? Wouldn't it be easier? But it turns out the rabbis don't actually care about history. So Rabbi Alan Lew says, and I agree, what they care about is our spiritual life. They are spiritual leaders, not historians. The only question worth asking isn't whose fault is it, but what's my role in this unfolding tragedy? What's my role in this unfolding tragedy? I wasn't there then, but I'm here now. How can I prevent that from happening again? And so obviously, the burning of Jerusalem then is not a direct analogy to what is happening in Israel and Gaza right now. But I would be remiss, we would be remiss if we didn't actually look at the ways that the stories contain really so many of the same elements if distributed among different players. There is a side with a very powerful army. There is an area under siege in which inhabitants are starving and dying, not by natural causes, but through the choices of those in power who would rather fight than negotiate. There are violent extremists, right? Yes, Hamas, and also in the Israeli government, who want to continue to fight, who are willing to sacrifice the lives of their own people and people on the other side because they're on the other side, who want to continue to fight till the victory. And if you go to Israel, you'll see on billboards, it says, Ad ha-nitzachon, until the victory. What is that victory if all that is left is rubble and destruction and humiliation and anger, leading to another cycle of violence, if not tomorrow, then the day after that? Right? The Biryonim drew their own people into a fight, promising them to bring security, and it brought bloodshed and suffering and destruction and exile. What is victory if it means justifying and standing by the starving of children? So the spiritual question of this season and of this moment is not which side deserves more outrage, and it's certainly not, gosh, how do we win the PR war? The PR war is really what's killing us. There's an Israeli news anchor. She has an English language podcast called Unholy, but she's a well-known Hebrew language news anchor who's on the main television station. She is not known for being a raging lefty. She's a centrist. Her name's Yonit Levy. And on national television 2 days ago, she said, this is not a PR problem. This is a moral problem, on a clip that went viral around Israel. So the question for us is, what's my role? Well, I don't live there, I live here. But as this story unfolds this time, what part can I play? What little part can I play to create a different future? So Moses, our prophets, the sages, they all have the same message. We have to honor our pain, right? If you don't actually honor the pain you've endured as a victim, suffering circumstances you can't control, you actually will continue to replay that role again and again and again. You don't heal from it if you don't honor it. So Tisha B'Av is about honoring the pain that we have suffered, and it is also about embracing the movement toward action that we can change. We can change ourselves, we can change the world, we have to believe it, and we have to believe that there is some tshuva that is uniquely ours in this moment. Something we can do to heal the brokenness that we have inherited. So I pray that we all take that seriously in this season to come. Shabbat Shalom.